So, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the second talk in this visit by Gayatriprana. And we're also very happy to have a special guest from India, Pravrajika Ajayaprana. And Ajayaprana will be giving a talk tomorrow. But firstly, tonight, Pravrajika will be speaking on using discernment in daily life. And after the talk, there'll be some time for questions and answers, and then we'll conclude by listening to a guided meditation by Pravrajika Ajayaprana mataji. And tomorrow, Ajayaprana will be speaking on practical Vedanta, and that will be accompanied by a PowerPoint presentation. And for those of you who don't know, Ajayaprana is the Assistant Secretary for the Matri Bhavan Maternity Hospital run by Sri Sharada Math in Calcutta. And she's also going to share or tell us a bit about the inspiring work that the hospital is doing for women and babies, and quite challenging work, quite challenging circumstances. So it's quite inspiring and quite touching to hear about that from her. So we'll look forward to hearing about that tomorrow. We are live on Zoom. Welcome to those joining us via Zoom, and we'll be uploading. The talk tonight will be uploaded to our Vedanta Society New South Wales YouTube channel. Last night's talk is already up there, and likewise tomorrow we'll be putting that up on YouTube as well and going live on Zoom. I'll make some announcements about a couple of books later on, but I think now without delay we will listen to Gayatriprana's talk.
Om Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityor ma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead me from the unreal to the real. Lead me from darkness to light. Lead me from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. The Yoga Vasishta says, Sandosha paramo labha, satsanga paramo gatihi, vichara paramam jnanam, shamohi paramam sukham. Contentment is reckoned as the best gain, good company as the right course, reasoning the true knowledge, and calmness the highest bliss of man. So therefore, speaking about four things: contentment, good company, reasoning, and calmness. It says further that these are the sure means to break off the trammels of this world. The practice of any one of these virtues will surely lead to the gain of all the other virtues. So you don't know, not that you have to go around practicing all of them. One, if you practice sincerely, the others will come naturally. They all go together. Get hold of one, you get all the other rest. So today we will be dealing with vichara, reasoning, or discernment, or discrimination, what in Sanskrit, vichara or viveka. We all need the power of discernment in our spiritual life as well as in the life in the world. We are always confronted with the problem of making choices, to be good or bad, to be happy or unhappy. We have got a choice. We are confronted from those choices. And one wrong choice, one wrong or careless step can lead us to happiness, misery and happiness and regret for the whole life. So we have to be very careful how we make the choices. But you have to remember, every choice making is not discernment. We may make a choice, not discernment in the real sense of the term. We make a choice of buying and expensive furniture or a piece of art to make the family happy. We won't call that discernment. It's just a choice. But when you make a choice which affects your life, whole life, that is real. You have to use the discernment. True discernment is the process by which the mind makes the correct assessment of values and reaches the right conclusions. In the Katha Upanishad, we see the teacher, Lord of Death, Yama, speaks about Shreyas and Preyas. Shreyas is that which is conducive to true welfare of the person, which leading to freedom. As Preyas is pleasant, immediate happiness, attractive, you get immediate happiness. That is Preyas. So Shreyas is freedom from the senses. Preyas is freedom of the senses. We all speak about freedom, but what the real freedom is freedom from the senses. Now at present, we cannot say we are really free. We are all under the control of our senses. Our senses say, look at this, look at hear this. We don't have any freedom there. We are forced to see, we are forced to hear, we are forced to smell. We don't have any control. But those who are really free, they have got their senses under control. That's the real freedom. So that's the difference between Shreyas and Preyas. When you're following the path of Shreyas, you get freedom from the senses. If you're following Preyas, we have got freedom of senses, but that may lead to, ultimately, may not be lead to happiness. Often it is suffering. And Upanishad further says that these two approach us, all of us. And the wise person examines both, reasons out, and chooses the Shreyas, which is conducive to real, true happiness and welfare, rather than going after the temporary, immediate attractions. When a person considers the sense pleasures or organic satisfaction as the be-all and end-all of life, then they go after that. But then after that, they get immediate pleasures, immediate happiness. But as the imitation of Christ says, every going out ends up coming back home miserable. When you go out on an evening, go and party, have a lot of drinks and dance and all that. Sometimes you end up fighting. You see, especially in Sydney, I don't know how Adelaide is. In Sydney, often we can see after the party, end up people fighting, stabbing, kill, accidents. Sometimes even death happens. So where did your happiness go? Immediate happiness. You want to have a party enjoyment, and then ends up in misery, sadness. But only when a person follows the path of Shreyas, what is conducive to welfare, then he begins to start on the path, on the moral path, and slowly move away from the sense pleasures. Then once you leave up the sense pleasures, what's the next level? We increase, or we rise up from the pleasures of the senses to intellectual pleasures, intellectual happiness, aesthetic happiness. You know that all the pleasures we can get only from the senses. Little child, its pleasures, happiness is only on the senses. Eating, drinking, playing, all. But as it grows, the child learns to read books, get pleasure from that. Or if it is artistic, drawing, painting, or playing music, playing sports. So the happiness comes, we go a higher level. intellectual, aesthetic, and then you come to a level when you get happiness from the spiritual level. Slowly, slowly it goes. And only when it happens, when we turn from the external sense pleasures to deeper, higher levels of happiness, then only we can say we are really human beings. Otherwise, we are not different from animals. Animals have their pleasures on the senses. If we are also following only sense pleasures, what's the difference? We say man is an intelligent animal. Of course, because if you are on sense pleasures, you are an intelligent animal, but you are not using your intelligence in the proper way. Using the intelligence in the proper way means you are turning to higher levels of happiness. So Shankaracharya, in his commentary on the Gita, he says in one place, man remains a man only so long as his mind retains the capacity to discriminate between the right and wrong. Man remains a man only so long as his mind retains the capacity to discriminate between right and wrong. If you don't have the capacity to discriminate between right and wrong, reason out, analyze, find out what is right and what is wrong, then you are no longer a human being. You are no better than animal. When this capacity is lost, he ceases to be a man. Human form for me is there, whether the human form, the body, male body or female body, but we cannot really call that person a human being, because that person doesn't have the capacity to distinguish between what's right and what's wrong. Then the doubt arises, why do people generally go after these immediate pleasures? If immediate pleasures are leading to unhappiness in the long run, why do people go after that? Again, Shankaracharya says, on his commentary on the Katha Upanishad, he says, though man has the freedom to choose, yet from the point of view of means and ends, Shreyas and Prayas approach man in mixed up form, as it were, in a form difficult to discriminate by a person of poor understanding. See, man has got a wisdom to choose, freedom to choose. We have got the freedom. From the point of means and end, we have got the freedom. But these two, the Prayas and Shreyas, come to us in a mixed form. So it's very hard if you don't have the power of proper understanding, proper reasoning power, you don't develop. It's very hard to distinguish and realize what's right and what's wrong to make the right choice. It's very, very hard. That's why he says, they approach, the Shreyas and Prayas approach man in a mixed up form, as it were, in a form difficult to discriminate by a person of poor understanding. So we need keen understanding, the power of discrimination or discernment to make the right choice. So we can say this power of discernment is the first door to freedom, liberation. Only with the dawn of discernment can one feel like turning away from the senses of the senses and the external world. Till then, the question of leading a spiritual life, thinking about higher things, doesn't even come into the mind of the person, let alone feel attracted towards that. So Sri Ramakrishna says, the people have to go through enjoyment and get satiated. You cannot take the toy from a child's hand. If a child is playing with a toy, if you take it, child will start screaming. But after a few years, say the child has become a teenager, do you think the child will be playing with a toy anymore? It will leave it. So we have to grow up. But as we want to go on enjoying these pleasures of the world, and we refuse to grow up. Physically, we are grown up. Mentally, we think we are grown up. But spiritually, we are still babies. We don't want to grow up. We are very happy catching the shadows. We think they are the real thing. We are catching the shadows. And these shadows they aren't going to give us happiness. We may think that, oh, we are highly intellectual. We are great scientists. But is physical science going to give us the reality? No, it's there. One of the astronomers, Gustav Stromberg, he's a famous Mount Wilson astronomer. He writes, we are living in a world of shadows. Physical science describes a play of shadows projected on the screen of our consciousness. A play of shadows projected on the screen of our consciousness, but it is completely incapable of telling us anything about the essence or substance which casts the shadow. We are seeing the physical science is showing us the shadows on the screen of our consciousness. But what is casting the shadow? The essence behind what's casting shadow, it doesn't say, it can't say anything. It cannot tell us anything about the essence or substance which casts the shadows, or about the ultimate reality of which the shadows are only symbols. We are only seeing the shadows. The physical science is only dealing with the shadows, and we think that is all. So we need to get to that truth, that existence which casts the shadows. That's the real thing. So the first check to the sense-bound life comes from the real reasoning power, the power of discrimination. And when that power of discrimination, power of discernment takes charge of our life, both physical and mental, then we are starting on the path. Then we are exercising our buddhi, intellect. Now in the Katha Upanishad again, the teacher speaks about they give the chariot imagery. The body is a chariot the body is compared to chariot. Now, then chariot is drawn by horses. What are the horses? The five senses are the horses. And the road along which the chariot is moving is a sense pleasures. So the horses are attracted by the things on the road. How do we control the horses? By holding the reins tight. And the reins are the mind. Who is holding the reins? The driver, the charioteer. So the charioteer is the buddhi, our intellect. So our intellect has to control with the help of the mind, control the senses. The charioteer holds the reins and control the horses. Charioteer is the intellect. The mind is the reins, and the senses are the horses. So through the help controlling the mind, the buddhi, intellect, controls the senses. And buddhi, the sarathi, has to use the reasoning power, how to control. Yoga Vasishta, again quoting from Yoga Vasishta. Yoga Vasishta says, if one moves about with discrimination or viveka as one's friend, one does not fall prey even to the great temptations. If we have keep our intellect keen and have discernment or viveka as our friend, then there is no fear of any temptation. Even the greatest temptation won't be able to affect, because we have got that power of discrimination, power of discernment. You'll be able to reason out and reject it straight away. No with the if discrimination power is strong, no illusion can overpower us. To quote the yogavasis again, it says, reason is the lamp to show us the right and wrong, and instrument for accomplishment of our desires. Reason is the lamp. It shows us what's right, what's wrong. And it is a tool to accomplish our desires. By reliance on the right reason, one crosses over easily this wide ocean of the world. So depending upon the reason, the discernment, discriminatory power, we can cross over the world. Whatever temptation, we won't be able to powered by that. So we can say the discernment is a process by which the mind makes the correct assessment of the values and reaches the right conclusion. So using the discernment to reach the right conclusion, it involves right action, right judgment, right conduct, right self-analysis, right attitude, etc. What do we mean by right action? What should be done? What should not be done? We all know the do's and the don'ts. And according to Bhagavad Gita, the right action is the action performed without attachment. No attachment at all. Without love and hatred. See, you will find why without love? Because love and hatred go together. As in the Vedanta, we always speak about the pairs of opposite. If there is love, if there is hatred. So without love and hatred, and without desire for the fruits of action. That's the right action, according to Bhagavad Gita. So what are the conditions for the action to be the proper action, the right action? It should be done without attachment, without love and hatred, without the desire for the fruits of action. That's the right action. And it is, how can we perform such action? Performing as service to humanity and as offering to God, offering to the divine. Again, the right action, it involves, sometimes we may have to do unpleasant things, unpleasant actions, unpleasant work. Some work which is not very pleasing, pleasant, but do it willingly, happily, with a smile, without any self-conscious, without any complaint. Do it because it is to be done. It is to be done, I'll do it. We do even unpleasant things if it is for somebody whom we love. Say, for your child, the child is sick, you are ready to spend the whole night without sleep on the bedside of the child, look after it. But if you had to do that for another person, even if it is your workplace, if it is extra time, you will start complaining. And another thing, when you do it for the child, if something goes wrong, you got so upset, even if you know. That's why we always hear that the doctors don't treat their children or the family, because there's attachment. Okay, you can't do the right action. The attachment comes. So that is why the right action is done without attachment, without love and hatred, without the desire for the fruits of action. And it says here, doing unpleasant things with a smile. It's not very easy. It's very hard. We can say all these things, but when you try to practice it, it's very hard. But they say, try, do it. Maybe in the beginning, it is just an artificial smile, but continue doing it. After a long period of time, gradually it becomes natural. There is an interesting incident in the life of Saint Teresa of Lisieux. I think that's the one who's called known as Little Flower, Saint Teresa of Little Flower. She says in her testimony, in her biography, she says, there was one another nun in the convent whom she could not tolerate. Her behavior, her actions always irritated Teresa. But then she started reasoning. Since that person has become a nun, she must be beloved of God. Otherwise, how can she be in the nunnery, become a nun? So she forced herself to show affection to that nun. Whenever if she came across her, smile at her, and then asked her spoke to her pleasantly. And that other nun didn't have no idea why she is behaving like this. She's forcing herself. She didn't know. She thought, oh, she loves me so much. So one day, after a few months, she came over to her at one of the recreation time and asked, why do you always smile at me? What do you find in me so attractive? And she says, by the time, she really loved her. Because in the beginning, it was a forced thing, but gradually it happened that she started loving, because she started seeing she come to feel that she's a beloved of God. So I love her. So in the same way, when we are doing the action, beginning it may be hard. You don't like it too, but think it is a service to God and do it with a smiling face. So slowly, naturally, gradually over the period of time, it becomes natural to us. So this right action, according to Dr. Radhakrishnan, he says, it's a difference between an act of love and an act of law, an act of grace and an act of obligation. There's a big difference between an act of love and an act of law, because the law says I should do it, I do. But the same action, if I do with love, it's a big difference. Why do we say our mother's cooking is the best? Because mother in her cooking adds a special ingredient, something called love. The food that you buy from the shop, ingredients may be same or better, but the taste is not same, because that particular ingredient called love is not there. Only law is there. Again, an act of grace and an act of obligation. That's the difference between the right action and the wrong action. And we need the superior intellect to make this distinction. Superior intellect, Sattvika Buddhi, to distinguish between what should be done and what should not be done. And trying to determine the right action brings in the right judgment. We often base our decisions on the judgment of others. We often live in the minds of other people. What are the other people going to say? Even our dressing, what does the other people say? When we dress, put on the dress, our idea is how do I look to others? Not that what's comfortable for me. Sometimes even if it is uncomfortable, you want to give a good appearance, you may be dressing yourself feeling uncomfortable. But so our life is determined by the decision of other people. It's so sad. Where is the freedom? We don't have freedom. Often we make the decision depending upon what others decide, how the judgment or what the society decides. Often in one of the Indian languages, what do 4 people say? If you do like this, if you behave like this, what do 4 people say? What does the society say? That's the idea. It's not that whether it is right or wrong, what does society say? So the right judgment is not what I think or what other people think, but what it really is. We want to do things in such a way that we are happy and free from sorrow and misery. And we make a choice thinking that will give us happiness. But often we find that what we thought is going to give us happiness is not giving us happiness. inside it is giving misery. So Swami Vivekananda says, happiness comes to man wearing the crown of misery. The moment you choose happiness, you are choosing misery. So does it mean that you should not have happiness, be a block of wood or stone? Now we should, if you are going to choose happiness, you should be ready for misery also. It will come naturally. They're the two sides of the same coin. All coin, there is no coin with the same picture on both sides. If you choose one, the other one will come with yours. So it's important that we use our faculty of discernment and determine what gives us right happiness, the proper happiness, the real happiness. Real happiness without any misery. The happiness that we usually speak of, that's what Swamiji says, happiness comes with wearing the crown of misery. But there is happiness which does not give us, which does not lead to misery at all. That is the real bliss. But when we speak about happiness, there are different types of happiness. The lowest one, they say, Vishaya Sukha, sense, the happiness or pleasures we get from sense enjoyments. That is, if you are only on that level, as we said earlier, you are almost on the animal level. And little children, they have their happiness is on the sense level. Then we have the intellectual, the aesthetic. Then there is joy of sense control and joy of spiritual practices. Doing worship, doing singing, bhajans. People get great joy. It's good. You have reason to a higher level of happiness. And then there is the still higher level of happiness, which is the bliss of self-realization or God realization. We may say, oh, that's too far off, too high. Yes, it is too high, but that does not mean that we should, because it is too high, it is too far for us to reach, does not mean that you go down to the level of the sense pleasures alone. In the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, we can see towards the end, after Sri Ram, in the Gospel, there is one chapter, the last chapter, which deals some of the entry after Sri Ramakrishna passed away. Like an appendix it's given. So there, Rakhal, one of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, who later became Swami Brahmananda, is talking with M, the recorder, and he says, sometimes visitors come to the young monks, and then while talking, they say, you have not realized God, so why do you make such a big fuss? Then he said, Narendra gives a very good reply. He says, just because we have not realized God, do you mean that we go on begetting children? Just because you haven't got Rama, do you mean that you go after Shyama? Do you mean that because you haven't realized God, do you mean we go behind woman and gold? No, we try. Just because Brahmananda, the bliss of God realization is high, that doesn't mean that you immerse yourself in worldly pleasures. Because this highest happiness is always hard. It's difficult. And in the beginning, we don't feel any taste for that. In the Gita, Sri Krishna says it is like poison in the beginning. This highest happiness, trying to get the bliss of God realization. It's like, because it involves self-control, practices. It's hard struggle to walk on the spiritual path, to progress on the spiritual path is hard struggle. The Upanishad says it's like walking on the sharp edge of a razor. It's very, very difficult. So so we don't feel like doing, And if you are asked, forced to do, it's like poison. But you go on practicing forcibly with willpower, continue it, and then in the end, you feel it's like nectar. There is the fruit amlaki, gooseberry. Those who have eaten the raw gooseberries knows when you first eat, it's bitter, sour, bitter. But after towards the end, you feel that the sweetness comes out. So there's a saying, the words of the elders and the gooseberry are bitter in the beginning, sweet in the end. The real happiness, the highest happiness, sattvic happiness is like that. Bitter, it's like poison in the beginning. But towards the end, you see how it's like nectar. It leads you to true happiness without any misery. Whereas the mediocre happiness, the rajasic happiness, is like nectar in the beginning. But in the end, it gives you only misery. So we have to make the right judgment. What is conducive to real happiness? We have to make the real judgment. Is our actions, our surroundings, are they really conducive to true happiness? We have to make the decision, the right judgment. Then after the right judgment brings us to right self-analysis, right attitude, and right mindedness. Happiness is not an external thing. External things give some impressions, but the happiness we feel in the mind. It's a matter of mind. It's the attitude of the mind. So self-analysis, alertness, correct attitude towards events and happiness are very important. Our happiness depends upon our response to events and happenings. We cannot control the external events, but we can control our response to it. How somebody behaves towards me, I don't have any control. But I can control how I respond to their behavior. Say somebody suddenly comes and abuses me. I can get angry, I can keep quiet. It's up to me. I got the choice. I can make the decision how I respond to that. So we have got the control over our response. And often we worry about what's going to happen. But we worry and lose our peace of mind about something which we think is going to happen. It may never happen at all. We simply waste our energy. Or worrying about something over which we have no control. Epictetus, the Greek thinker, says there is only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will. No point in worrying about things which you don't have any control over it. And there is no point about fighting about something which we don't know or over which we don't have control. But we do all this foolishly. That's why we need to use this power of discernment in every moment of our life. This superior happiness, the sattvika happiness, is the result of purity of mind and purity of intellect. And the taste for this higher happiness can be acquired only after prolonged practice. That's what Bhagavad Gita says. It comes through purity of mind and purity of intellect, and as a result of prolonged practice. Most of us don't even feel like practicing. We are happy with our day-to-day life, our sense pleasures. So how do we get turned towards that? The great teachers have found out the method. They know how to manipulate us. So they say in the many of the Sanskrit hymns, when you read, you can see the last verse describes the result. If you chant this verse, this hymn, every day, morning and evening, these are the results you are going to get. They give a list. And what are the results? You will have long life, health, wealth, children, grandchildren. So that's all we want. And then freedom, liberation, salvation. So that they put that as a last word. All that first they give all these things which we are attracted to. You will have long life, you will have wealth, you will have health, wealth, long life, children, grandchildren. You're happy. And then they say, finally, you will have freedom, salvation. Because we are chanting the name of God. So as we go on chanting the name of God, we are maybe chanting just because we want wealth, we want health, we want children, we want our children to get good job, marry a good person, we want grandchildren, anyway, we are praying to God. But the name of God purifies the mind. If you are sincerely praying to God, even if it is for selfish purposes, it gradually purifies the mind. That purified mind, in the it takes a long time to get that selfishness out of the mind. But you go on repeating, gradually the mind gets purified and will get salvation. But that process, that long drawn process, can be fast-tracked if you use the discernment. See, these are temporary, these are impermanent. I want the permanent one. If you think like that, use your right judgment and use the discernment, then this process, which is long drawn, going through the health, wealth, the progeny, discernment, the long time, we can go straight to moksha, salvation. Another field where we need to use discrimination in our daily life is to determine what is virtue and what is vice, what is dharma and what is adharma. It's very difficult to give a precise, definite definition of dharma, righteousness. Dharma, the word dharma is used in different contexts, got different meaning. That's often in Sanskrit. In the Bhagavad Gita, you can see, if you look at karma, dharma, yajna, so many different meanings are there depending upon the context. So dharma, the term is used for righteousness, duty, virtue, all that is used. And what is dharma for one person, what is virtue and the right action for one person can be wrong action for another person. What is dharma in one situation or circumstance can be adharma in another situation, another circumstance. Just to give an example, in a war, the soldiers go and kill people, the enemy, and we laud them to the sky. They are great soldiers, they're brave soldiers, protected our country. And walking along the street, a man kills another person, and we term that person as a murderer. In both cases, what happened is another person was killed. But one was dharma, righteousness, duty, and other became adharma. So we cannot give a concrete definition or this is what is meant by dharma, this is adharma, we cannot say. Depends upon the situation, the circumstances, the person. So Swami Vivekananda says the only definition that can be given of morality is this: that which is selfish is immoral, that which is unselfish is moral. So we can speak about dharma only in a general way, as based on, because dharma is always based on eternal ethical values of truth, non-violence, charity, chastity, etc. If they are based on that, that's morality. And as Swami Vivekananda says, anything selfish, your selfish purpose, then it is not dharma. If it is unselfish, for the welfare of humanity, it is dharma. Even though the war is bad. People are suffering. But still, if it is for a just cause, it is Dharma. Bhagavad Gita, where was Bhagavad Gita given? The teaching of Bhagavad Gita in the battlefield. And Krishna is asking Arjuna to fight and kill all those people. And Arjuna, if you read the Gita in the first chapter, Arjuna gives very good arguments how bad the war is. What are the consequences of war? But Krishna is asking Arjuna to fight because it is for just cause to fight against injustice. It is the duty. Without any selfishness, without attachment. That's the whole teaching of Bhagavad Gita. Work without attachment. Then you won't be affected by the results. It is selfishness, it is attachment which is causing all the problem. For that, we need the power of discernment, how to, whether it is, am I doing with attachment? Am I doing it for my selfish purpose, fulfill selfish desires? To distinguish that, you need sharp power of discernment. Another field is, or I can say, Viveka is defined by Shankaracharya as distinguishing between what is real and what is unreal, what is permanent, what is impermanent. Now, if you look at the world, external world and internal world, we see that everything is changing always, constantly. In the world, there is nothing which remains the same. In the human body, everything changes all the time. In the external world, everything is changing. The whole universe, it's always changing. Changes the, what's that, only truth you can say. And even the internal world, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions are all changing all the time, constantly. And this impermanence is felt by many as a vague feeling of emptiness, something lacking. So we see often people going around looking for the roots. They want to find the roots, find the meaning of life. It's all because of this vague feeling of emptiness, this search for meaning. And without proper guidance, that can lead to, this unconscious search may lead to pessimism. Then alcohol, drug abuse, violent behavior, all comes from that. And those who are fortunate enough to get proper guidance are able to convert this unconscious discernment into effective spiritual practice. And for this, we need to have the power to discriminate between what is permanent and what is impermanent. And this discernment between permanent and impermanent is the first step on the spiritual path. And gradually, if you are following it, practicing it, gradually the mind will turn away from the impermanent things and turns towards the permanent, eternal bliss, awareness, existence. One of the presidents of the Ramakrishna Math, Swami Madhavananda, is a great scholar. He was a great scholar. He had gone to America for some treatment. So at that time, there was, where Big Swami has come, people are there asking questions, clearing their doubts. So somebody asked him, how can we practice discrimination? How can we practice discernment? So the answer that Swami gave is, if we bring this idea to our mind all the time, or at least as much of time as possible, this idea that God alone is real, all else is temporary, impermanent, ephemeral, this idea itself brings us a sense of awareness. And that is practicing discernment. That is Try to bring in the idea in your mind all the time, or at least as much time as possible, that God alone is real. All else is temporary, impermanent, ephemeral. Then he continues. There is no how to it. How do you practice discernment? There is no how. Simply you just wish to do it, do it. Simply you just wish to do it, and not in theory alone, but in practice. You have to set about it, you have to go about it, just as you do for other things. For example, you are thirsty, what do? You drink water. You are hungry, you eat food. So if you want to practice this discernment, how to do discernment? Practice it. There's no other answer. There's no to it. Just practice it, that's all. And practice it all the time, or as much time as possible. So this thought must be kept before the mind as far as we can, in the best way possible. So thus we can see that discernment is the lamp that shows the way out of ignorance to the abode of eternal bliss. And we need to progress in spiritual life, to be happy in life. This bliss that we are speaking about is not after death. In this life, when we are here in the body, we have to have bliss, happiness without any misery. To progress, to reach that state, we need this lamp burning bright, this lamp of discernment. It's very important. We need that. Without that, we will be making the wrong choice, and maybe we may have to regret the whole life. So it's very important that you have to practice this.
So there's time for questions and answers.
Who is making the discernment? If I'm discerning something, I'm only really aware of the apparent me. Right? I mean, I ask to be conscious and aware of Brahman. So who is making this discernment? Is it as the apparent me? Am I asking to be got out of the way so that Brahman can come in to make that discernment? I mean,
the apparent I is making the decision.
yes.
Because that is the apparent I who is suffering. The real I is not suffering, don't have no problem at all. It is the apparent I who is suffering happiness and misery. So it is the apparent I make the decision and making the right choice, so that the apparent I will be free from happiness and misery.
Right, so that each time I make a discernment, I'm the small I, the apparent I is coming out of the way, and Brahman is coming through, or not coming through, I don't know how to put it. I'm in Brahman. So therefore, really, there's only one end to this, isn't there?
Yeah.
That's lovely. I love it. Thank you.
Mataji, what if you don't want to make a decision at all?
Pardon me?
What if you don't want to make any decision at all, discrimination, whatever? I just want to be what I am at present.
No, we always make decisions. We all make a choice. We cannot live without making choices, because we are always two things will be always there. The good and bad, the pleasant and unpleasant, they're all always there. So we are forced to make choice when you live in this life. The life is full of contradictions, and we have to make this, either choose one or other. We cannot have both. We
The
cannot
reason why I say that was my grandson quite innocent said to us, you die eventually, but he said, I will say, no, I'm not going to die.
Yes. You had to make a decision.
But he said, I'll tell him I'm not going first.
That's a child's.
So you are not going to make the decision of
No,
about going. The decision is not in our hands anyway. We don't have to make the decision.
but if you're a spark of God, basically in that situation, you and me, you're telling the body you're not going to die, telling the body you're not going to go. And the reason why I say that there are a number of instances that come across my side that a person can actually postpone death if they have got a strong determination of an objective. Give you an example. Whether we believe it or we don't believe, our uncle whose son was in imprisonment, and he says, until I see him again come out of prison, I will not go. And in the midst, he also said, you go away, you all go away, don't come and take me until I see. But the minute he saw him come out of prison,
He died.
he died.
Yeah, that happens. From attachment also it can happen that the life can, we hold on to somebody. The person may be suffering but still won't die. Medically, they say the person is about ready to die, but is not dying. That happened in the case of our first President Mataji, Bharatiya Mataji. She was very ill, and the doctor said there's nothing to do. Clinically, medically, she is ready to die. Then they said, one among you to the monastics. Somebody is holding her back. Somebody is holding her back. It was true. So one of the young nuns went to Ajayaprana Mataji and another Mataji who had gone together, that I am the one who is holding her back. She knew because she got her mantra initiation from Bharatiya Mataji. She got her first vows, what we call brahmacharya, from her, and she was to get her sannyasa. And Bharatiya was to give sannyasa. She wanted sannyasa, but she was so sick, so there was no sannyasa that year. She didn't get. So she was holding her back with her attachment, with her faith. But then Mataji was suffering. And then they talked to her and convinced her, no, you are selfish. You don't even see how much she is suffering. So let her go. And the moment she let, within a day or two, she passed it. It happens. So often we see somebody is very attached to the person, that person can hold the person back from each other.
Is it that way? I mean, are we holding that person back, or that person is attached to us? So
Both are there. Both are there. So often we see somebody is dying, about to die, very sick, as they say, clinically dead, but still clinging to life. Then the family says, no, you can go, we'll be happy, we'll be all right. Not we'll be happy, we'll be all right. We'll be happy. Sorry.
Sometimes I am.
Thank God she's gone. We'll be all right. Don't worry about us. We'll be all right. We go in peace. So then slowly that person will leave the attachment. If his attachment is holding us back. We are holding by attachment, that person is attached to something or somebody and clinging to the body. Both ways are there.
No, my question is come back to that. And in fact, do you have a choice if you don't want to make yes or no? I don't want to make a yes or no. Well, equally both are difficult,
To go or not to go?
or whatever it is.
But then I think the decision will be made for you. You don't have to make the decision.
But you're talking about in any other situation.
Yes.
If you have to make a decision, you just then, I think you would stay undecided and miserable, and the situation could change to a point where you then have very
forced to
little
make that.
choice. And
Yeah.
it might be the wrong path, and you eventually have to come back to that point.
I was reading in the, we have got this 366 readings from different faith. And in the Muslim reading, I was reading the other day, one of the mystics, he was saying, he studied philosophy, he studied theology, all that, but then, and he was a great preacher with a lot of name, fame, everything. Then he studied Sufism and the mystics, and he realized that studying won't give that experience of real bliss. You have to practice. To be a mystic, you have to practice. Practicing that means you have to leave all this, give up his preaching and everything, because preaching takes all the time. So he was pondering what to do, not to. One day he will feel, oh, mystic path is the best thing, I should go on leaving everything. Then the next day he will feel, oh, that's temporary thing. If I leave all this, I leave my position, I lose my power over these people again. So a choice, which we've chosen to choose, went on for a long time. And then he says, then after some time, the choice was taken away from me. Because suddenly one day he found that he lost his voice. He completely lost his voice. He was standing in front of his students to teach them, explain. He lost his voice and he became so ill that he couldn't eat anything. So the choice was taken away from him. And he left everything and completely turned to the mystic path.
Mataji, my take on that would be that the choice wasn't taken away from him, that the choice was given, he was given the answer, that the discernment was made, that he'd gone from, he wasn't sure, he vacillated between two, and that had asked for the higher truth, and that the higher truth had been given, even though it wasn't just simply given. Do you know what I mean? Because so often we don't hear, we ask for discernment, you know, and we just can't get it. And so we're given something in the outer world. So for me, you know, my limited experience, but I practice discernment through the Ignatian retreat. And I say to God, what would you have me do? That's just my simplistic way. And, you know, sometimes I just don't get it because I don't want to get it. I don't want to hear what I'm being told. And I'm given something like that. I'm given a laryngitis, or does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what he one day he wanted to follow the path of mysticism. The next day he will say, oh, no, this, I have got all this position, the power over the king and his old ministers. So world is attracting. The next day again back to the spiritual life is attracting. The world, which one to choose? Which one to choose? Then it is his word that the choice was made for him.
You spoke about selfish acts and dharma. What if someone commits a selfish act, but it has on the side and millions of other needy people? So how would you classify that?
Then it is not a selfish act. When if it is only profiting you and your family or your small circle, then it's a selfish act. And if it is not, if it is harming others, but if it is doing good to thousands, it's not a selfish act.
What about the intention? Like, if the intention was just for himself, that was selfish.
Doesn't matter. If it is profiting others, then it is no longer a selfish act.
What about the intention? Like, if the intention was just for himself, that was selfish.
Doesn't matter. If it is profiting others, then it is no longer a selfish act. He may have started as a selfish act, but it has profited so many, then it's no longer a selfish act.
What about the thought commitment that you have, the thought without actually committing what you think you should do in itself? Is that a action, a discernment? In other words, for example, I always thought the easiest way to stop the war is to kill Putin. It's not a selfish act, according to you, because the world will be safe. But in my mind, I'm actually committing an act, even though I do not kill last and go and kill him.
See, of course, the intention is important. See, as in the earliest example we said about the soldier killing and the person, a murder, it's the intention, it is important. With what intention you are doing it.
But it's only halfway, like Buddha said, research is useless unless you follow with development.
Yes.
So all
We all, many people would like to kill him, but it's only in their heart.
Instead, Mataji, I would say, rather than think that thought, think in terms of maybe hoping that something would click and he would change the way he acts.
Yeah.
Or spend that energy of your thought in praying for all those who are suffering, that they may be released from that suffering.
You all be happy, may free from disease, that we pray, we free from disease, we free from unhappiness. And in that set of prayers, there is one, Durjana Sajjano Bhuyat, Sajjana Shanti Mapniyat, Shando Muchyadi Bandhepyo, Mukta Sanyan Vimojiyat. May the wicked become virtuous. May the virtuous attain tranquility. May the tranquil free others. And may the free others. May the wicked become virtuous. We pray for that. So we pray that his line of thought may change. If the whole world prays like that, naturally it will have the effect on you.
Mataji, more from the theory you were speaking of, you mentioned purity of mind and purity of intellect. What's the distinction between mind and intellect?
The intellect is the part which is using the discernment, and the mind is the part. Well, the intellect is also part of the mind, but intellect is the part which is using the discernment and which is closer to Atman, the self within. So when the intellect is purified, the power of the light of Atman is bright, is shining brighter. And the mind is the part where you get all the impressions from the external world. So we have to clear that, the filter which is coming, the impressions coming from the external world, we have to clear the filter so that the impressions are coming as they are, not colored by your mind. And then the intellect is, as it is purified, then we get a better picture what it is, able to discern properly.
So the mind is the physical aspect that works with the senses and that we use day to day. And the intellect is the more spiritual side.
I'm always bemused and somewhat disturbed when it comes to aversion to things you don't like, or difficulties, or even crises in your life. The habit of the mind to become like a tabloid newspaper with screaming headlines declaring what a crisis you're approaching and you're going to have to face. And then, of course, many times when you do come to that critical thing that you have to deal with, compared to what the mind was talking, describing it as, it always tends to be less, or many times less. It's not so bad, but how to head off the mind, and it's screaming, you know, sensationalism about what's coming. I mean, you are going to be challenged, of course. It is challenging. I'm talking about very difficult things. But the very time you need your mind on side to back you up, it's your main. It's a bigger enemy.
Yeah, mind,
How to
likes to exaggerate it,
yeah.
make it a big sensational thing, and then that is where we had to use this discernment.
So that's I mean, I guess it's alertness. You've got to be headed off, don't you? Really, to tell it, you know, in a way to shut up about it, if you can, I guess.
Then the intellect, you have to use the intellect there and say, reason out it. It's then reason and find out it's not that such a big deal as the mind you are imagining. It's not, or it won't be such a difficult thing as the mind is in. I am imagining in my mind.
My point is, it's not that you're going to become positive. You'd be asking too much many times for you to have a positive outlook on it, but at the very least, to be able to tone it down.
Yeah. And then also you can have, as we said yesterday, I'll be able to face this challenge with the help of God. All those things, depending upon your mood, depending upon the circumstances, the particular item of problem, we have to use different tactics.
Well,
Sometimes you're using discernment, sometimes using the help of God. It use different things.
Well, and in those sort of situations, there's so much of projecting into the future all the time. So I guess this is where to try and be in the moment, at least to give yourself a little break at the very least. With the value of that.
Focusing at that particular point. isn't it?
There's no point in worrying about what's going to happen. It never happen at all.
And that you recall that from your experience. I mean, basically, for example, 2 days ago, the stock market fell. The newspaper said, "Oh, we lost $10 billion in the stock market. What am I supposed to do? Jump up and down?" But the intellect said to me, "Don't worry about it. It goes and it comes down. You ride away, top or bottom. You have to ride it. But on the other hand, don't worry about it. But if you are jumping like a press, that you lost much money. You better go
Then
and sleep."
fear takes
Something like that. So the intellect comes about to play through the various experiences you have in the past, and you know their cycle of life that you go through, right? The wave up and down,
Yes.
but at the end will come through.
Yeah.
And that's where you have faith.
This is not really a question, but flying over here with Qantas, and they have the in-flight entertainment, and I saw there's a wellness section, and you click on that, and there are all these guided meditations. And I thought, my goodness, how far we've come. And it's about 5 or 6 different meditations. And when it comes to trying to tune into Vedanta and tap into the wisdom and so on, how far our society has come. 30 years ago, if you're delving into meditation, you were quiet about it. You didn't talk about it to anybody.
Got lynched.
And I was just so impressed. I thought it's so mainstream now.
Even Robert, in the television, 12 o'clock show in 10 and 9 and 7, this wellness clinic program comes every day.
What does?
Wellness and how to meditate, how to enjoy life, how do you use yoga and all lots of things.
That's one.
Yeah, I put on 1 o'clock my lunch and I always watching.
Mataji said that it's same as discerning that if we judge with our emotions and we judge with our intellect, then we've got a much better chance of working it out with the intellect. And she always said, didn't she? She always said you use your mind to work it out and it will come to you, not your emotions.
Now, emotions often get lead us because we're not, at the moment, emotions will take us on the wrong way. So you have to have both. Emotions, the mind and the heart. If it is only intellect, you become dry, you don't care for others. You should have a balance of both mind and the heart, head and heart, head and heart.
Also, I think Mataji used to say, and Ajayaprana Mataji used to say, that if you look at a problem and you're trying to find the solutions and there are none, you might not have a problem. There are no solutions.
You're imagining the problem.
Yeah.
And also she says, the answer to the problem will be in the problem. You think about the problem deeply, you'll find the answer to that.
Well, I love it when she say, when you don't have any problems, then you go and sit in front of the TV and watch other
fine.
people having problems.
Because we love problems. We need problems. We want to solve the problem. So if you don't have our own problem, watch other people's problem.
Mataji, the more we discern, using the intellect to discern, is that a process of not necessarily clearing the mind, but you're moving towards something, you're moving towards Atman, aren't you? If you're using the intellect to discern, then you're allowing Atman through. So therefore, does that actually not subdue the mind and the rest, but calm it or clarify it?
That's a need for discernment to calm the mind.
So it's not actually just about making decisions.
No.
It is about making decisions, but it's actually about
Decisions of what?
yeah.
To what to eat or where to go for which movie to see. No, that's not that type of decision. The decisions
About accessing
the higher values.
Yeah.
Do I need real happiness or just temporary enjoyment?
Okay.
Do I need real happiness? What should I do? Which path to follow?
So it's a real path, a total path, in essence. I mean, if you chose not to, I mean, I'm not suggesting you would choose not to do anything else, but it's an absolute pathway to experience
Yeah.
and true self.
That's why it's called this. That's the first door to freedom.
Wow.
Mataji, how do you manage complex problems that I mean, in day-to-day, I find just on the way drive here, I drove past a car that had broken down on the side of the road. And I could see the time and I saw I'm going to be late for Mataji's lecture. And this person seems okay, but I could stop and I could help them move the car off the side. And I actively chose to drive to Mataji. And the whole way I felt regret. I said, I left that poor person there. But then I said, but I would have walked in late and I would have interrupted Mataji's thing. And then I needed to listen to Mataji. So all of these factors I'm juggling. How in very complex situations, is there a solution that you can find? Do you just leave it all? It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I made this choice and hopefully that was the right one. Is there a
Use the intellect.
maybe I was just lucky. I still feel the pang of guilt. Maybe that was still on the side of the road.
I see him on your way.
You didn't drive over here.
No,
There's
no.
cats.
But in life we find very complex
Yeah.
things at work. And when the solutions are so multifaceted, all the options that you have.
You think deeply and choose the best one you think proper at that time. But then sometimes it's not the right one. But as you make the mistake, you learn from that, and then you evolve, and next time you'll make a better, more proper judgment.
So okay to make a mistake and build.
It's okay to make a mistake. We learn through mistakes.
Well, I think if you drove past him and if you're in the middle of the desert and the outback somewhere, well, that's a no-brainer, isn't it?
I'm late for Mataji.
The other two and I know Mataji has said that to me many times before, is that in situations similar to that, where you may spend a lot of energy and time regretting what you did,
It's better. to
know
be-
that you made a good choice for the day and pray for the guy you left behind, that someone else will help you for the day. Sometimes people like me, if I saw him, no point me stopping. The only help I could give is maybe company and a phone. I wouldn't be able to help. So yes, pray for them. So you've sent something at least in their direction that could help them. I'm very often in that position.
Mataji, that instance, is that action considered selfish? Where you didn't stop.
I felt selfish, which is why I still feel regret and why I brought it up.
But if the person is safe, you would have already reached out for help.
Well, it's very hard. This particular situation is not serious, but it's serious situation.
Yeah.
It's very hard to make decision. Yes. That's why we try reasoning and try to make the best decision. And then sometimes it may not be the right one. We regret, but learn from that.
You have to discriminate sometimes, especially in a lonely road. Some people deliberately bring the car down so they can hijack you.
Yep.
That's the
So
other thing.
many things happen, so you can
You
never
have
be
to
sure.
discriminate and see.
We had a situation like that. Sorry, it's not to do with everything, but we were going fishing to York Peninsula. We were traveling, would have been around 9:30 at night with 3 kids in the back. And we passed a car that was on a lonely stretch of road. And the man was standing outside. His wife's door, the partner's door was open, and he's standing outside waving for help. And prior to us getting past him, we could see cars had just gone past. And David went past, and then he pulled up, and then he said, maybe he's in stride, no one has stopped for him. And we stopped, and he didn't have the parts to change the tire. So we helped change the tire, and while changing, David had talked to him. He said, we've been standing here for hours. No one wanted to stop because people are frightened. at night times. But it was so sweet when we came back from our trip. He'd come to visit us and gave us some fish. Because he was so grateful that we had stopped. So it's very hard. You don't know what could have happened. But that day, everything went well. And he was able to go. So
Yeah, but you have to discriminate. As I say again, I pulled him from some distance away, and I just cast back and have a look what actually the situation, whether he's real or he's pretending.
I forgot to mention that the timing for the retreat tomorrow is from 2:50 to 5 p.m. and it'll conclude with some afternoon tea. And of course, tonight you're all invited to stay back and have dinner. And we'll be concluding soon with listening to a guided meditation by Revered Pravrajika Ajayaprana Mataji. And just a couple of quick announcements regarding Mataji. Got one copy left here now in Adelaide, we've got more in Sydney. At Pravrajika Ajayaprana, the Guiding Light. It was released last year, and it's the reminiscences of monastics and devotees, both in Australia and India. And there's a lot here. And surprisingly, I found not a lot of repetition. Everybody's got their own experiences they have with Mataji and their own insights. So a lot of variety, many angles, and a lot of photographs too. And the other book, just recently published, Vedanta in Practice, Spiritual Unfoldment. And it's some transcribed lectures that Mataji gave mainly in Malaysia, and there's a couple here given in India as well. So all those anecdotes you used to love hearing in Mataji's talks, many of them come here. So I've got a few copies of that available, and got, well, donation.
Oh, it's hiding behind. I'll put it out.
Yeah, so anyway, it will emerge out of there. So thanks for attending, and we'll conclude now.
No, I've got one.
So sit up straight, close your eyes, and dim the lights, and the technology rooms will actually play for me properly.
O Lord, may my mind be so cleansed and strengthened that it may respond to the great mind of the universe. May my heart be in tune with the heart of the universe. May His power and glory be manifest in my life. May His grace surround me and inspire me in all my actions. May I be shielded from all pettiness and littleness, and may I be made worthy of His love and blessing. Help me to open my heart that I may feel His divine inspiration in me and others. Please make my thought free from all distractions, my sight clear, that I may perceive His holy presence in everything and everyone. Rouse my mind and soul and spiritual consciousness, that I may manifest nobility and strength in all my actions. Closing your eyes, sit straight. Turn your inner eye towards your spiritual heart. See the light of the world shining therein. When we can't see, it means we are not looking properly. It is there, shining always, whether we look towards it or not, whether we are sleeping or awake, shining bright and clear. We can visualize it as a wonderful flame. In fact, it has no shape. It's just light, a beautiful light, which, as the great texts say, does not need any fuel to burn, does not send out smoke, does not cast any shadow of anything, penetrates and interpenetrates everything. Very powerful, but not piercingly hot. It's cool, bright, but not dazzlingly bright. It's a wonderful glow, ever shining in our heart. For convenience, we can picture it as a beautifully shaped flame. Now, if we try and concentrate on that flame fully believing that it is there, we can see it shining in the center of our heart. There it is, a beautiful flame, shining in the center of our heart. It belongs to us. Nobody can cover it. Nobody can steal it. Nobody can share it. It's my own. It belongs to me. But it is the light of the universe. It is the condensed form of the life energy of the universe. I carry it wherever I go. I can turn to it when I need help, when I need power, when I need energy. Concentrate on that flame and see that, feel it, that tiny currents of energy are flowing out from that very tiny, feeble, all around. In the center, the beautiful flame is there, and from that, tiny currents of energy are flowing out into all parts of the heart. Tiny little glow. From the heart, it flows into all parts of the body, into the arms, into the legs, into the trunk of the body, into the head. Just feel that the whole body is filled with a tiny glow, a beautiful feeling of a glow all over inside the body, with the flame shining in the center of the heart. The glow comes out and covers the whole body outside, covers the skin with a thin film of radiance. Just hold the body. Let us try to hold the body in this state of perfect equilibrium. There is the flame of beauty, radiance, joy, and power in the center of the heart. The tiny glow of its radiance coming out of the flame, filling the heart and overflowing into the body, has come out and spread all over the skin as a thin film of radiance. We are immersed in the bliss of God. We are surrounded by the power of God. We are filled with the radiance of God's beauty. We are carrying the condensed form of the life energy of the universe. Just let us hold ourselves in this state for some time. Hari Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace.